All right, glory to Jesus Christ. Saint Hyacinth, patron saint of weightlifters, pray for us. Just going to make sure we're all good to go on all platforms here. All right. Glory to God. We're having some issues with Instagram, but whatever. We're gonna roll with it. All right, guys. Good evening. Thank you for tuning into last week's stream. It was a smash success, and it was some of the most fun that I've ever had on a stream before. So glory to Jesus Christ, and thank you for tuning in and super chats and questions, etc. So tonight's going to be a good one. This is I'm very much looking forward to getting into this topic of muscular Catholicism, and I get to spurg out for an hour about muscular Catholicism, but I just want to make one thing very, very clear. And if I keep looking at my computer and on my cameras, because I have a new setup and I'm getting used to that. So bear with me, guys. What I want to make this absolutely clear. Although I love weight training, lifting weights, etc., physical culture, all that stuff, what I want to make absolutely clear is I don't want to try to inspire a whole sea of men to go and pursue this like a pagan in the body worshiping sense, right? This has to be with an emphasis on putting it in its proper place. And what I really mean by muscular Catholicism is, number one, spiritually muscular Catholicism. That this is a tool for your own sanctification, a tool to pursue penance and mortification, to mortify your senses, to subordinate your disorders to right reason. This is really what this is all about. Okay. And the side effect, the secondary effect of pursuing muscular Catholicism, if you will, physical culture, if you will, is of course the physical benefits. You're healthier. It honors the temple that God has given you. You become the embodiment of the true, good, and beautiful. Because I don't know, last time I checked, guys, okay, when you look at the Sistine Chapel, when you look at St. Peter's Basilica, if you look at all these cathedrals that Catholicism, that Catholics have built over the last 2,000 years, they are beautiful. Aesthetics matter. If we know the faith is true, if we know that it's good, if we know that it's beautiful, then the temple that God has loaned us here for our time on earth should reflect that beauty, not for our own vanity and for our own vainglory, but to bring glory to creation. Okay. And to put it simply, okay, we're going to be getting into why physical culture belongs to Catholicism and its importance, not just with my own personal anecdotes and observations, but also in the words of a man much more articulate, much more intelligent, much holier than I, in Pope Pius XII. He was known as the sportsman Pope, who did a lot of these discussions on physical culture, how it relates to morality, moral victory, being, more magnanimous, if you will, more virtuous, if you will. So I'm actually going to be getting into an Instagram post that I made that summarized one of his talks. And one of these talks is an allocution to the Italian Sports Association back in 1945. And he went over these specific points. If you want to read the full document, I highly recommend you do so. It's in the description below. And he's done several other, talks like this, and you guys should check all of them out. I was actually made familiar with this content through my good friend, Will Noland. You'll know him because we've done Seamask together. He's doing some fantastic work on the marriage side of things, Catholic marriage side of things. You should check him out. If that's what you're looking for, the best marriage content online is Marriage Mastery. Will Noland. I want to give him a shout out. He's a wonderful guy. So that's who made me familiar with this. And it was very validating, very vindicating for me, because I felt like I was just shouting these ideas out into the ether with no real basis, but understanding that there are not just Pope Pius XII, but also saints that have spoken about this. St. Ignatius of Loyola, I'm paraphrasing, but he said that fitness or exercise, when it's well ordered, is a means of worship that is pleasing to God. I know St. Pope John Paul II spoke about this, as well as other saints and popes, etc. And so we're going to be getting into why it belongs to Catholicism, physical culture, and I want to get into the simple answer, and then we'll get into this more. Only the religion of the resurrection honors the body properly. Okay, no other faith honors the total composite being that is man. That is 100% flesh, 100% spirit, and understanding that these are inseparable in the way that God has created us. And so if we know this about the faith, which is absolutely true, it's something that the church has upheld in the virtue of the natural law, the virtues, and anything good comes from our faith. So by virtue of that, when such a pursuit is well ordered, it's got that Catholic rubber stamp of approval. It's got that papal bull insignia, if you will, if you really want to get meathead about it. But really, this is about spiritually muscular Catholicism, keeping things in their proper order. Because when it's in its proper order, physical discipline enhances spiritual discipline. It helps one mortify their disorders and subordinates them to right reason, and it brings glory to the created temple of God. So I'm going to make a couple points before I get into the actual document itself, is that when this is not in its proper order, and I've been there. I've been the guy that has lived like a pagan. You live no different than somebody that is like the Adonis cult. You're living like a Homo sapien. You can fill in the blank there. That is doing it for his own vainglory. That is doing it purely for the natural means, which have no merit whatsoever. What I mean really here, again, is embodying the true, the good, the beautiful, that is our faith, not just in the way that we practice our faith, which is number one, but also in creation. And an anecdote on that too. What I personally love, and this can apply to any physical discipline, right? So if you like martial arts, if you like sport, if you like running for whatever reason you like running, cool, that's great. Why I think lifting weights is king here is for a couple reasons. Number one, I think all men, God has given us this gift of strength to serve him, our families, our communities, etc. We're meant to be protectors. And if we are not strong, we're not living up to the full potential of our creation. Okay. And in a way, to be able to do this in an objective and measurable way can really only be done with something like a barbell, with a dumbbell, with a machine that you can micro load, you can progressively overload. And a lot of those same principles that get somebody strong can make somebody holy. Because if you can understand fortitude, you can understand temperance. So fortitude, subjecting the body to these external stressors, these external vigors of training. You understand perseverance, you understand mortification, endurance, longanimity, etc., which are all sub virtues of fortitude. And then you also couple that with temperance, right? The virtue of fasting, controlling your diet, eating healthier, etc. To again honor the body. That is a vehicle for holiness, and you'll be able to better apply justice when you have discipline. What do I mean by that? Rendering to God what he is owed. So when you're not experiencing consolation, when you're in a dry period in prayer and you don't want to pray, when you are used to showing up when you don't feel like showing up, well, you're going to pray when you don't feel like praying, which from my understanding, many theologians and priests that I've listened to talk about this, is even more meritorious in the eyes of God, because you're not seeking God for what he can do for you, but you're seeking God for God's sake. And I think this is where grace building upon nature really is made manifest, because you're building these physical disciplines, not just for the secondary benefits of like a better physique, if you will, but for the spiritual discipline and really subordinating our weakness. So here's an anecdote and how it leads to greater moral victory. Okay. So a lot of guys that come to me struggle with lust, and a lot of it's playing on my phone. So a lot of men that come to me struggle with lust during my coaching program, for example. And this is not just applied to guys that struggle with lust. You can apply this to any number of the vices, but typically, sloth, gluttony, and lust have like this special relationship. If somebody is gluttonous, they're more likely to be slothful. If somebody is slothful, they're more likely to be lustful, etc. And they play upon each other. And so a lot of these guys, what they have in common is that they're not physically active. They kind of eat like crap. They're not paying attention to their sleep hygiene. So the first thing I do is I get them set up with a training program. Okay. Get them in the gym, get them putting them through the paces of barbell training, progressive overload training, and then also getting them on a proper and well-ordered nutrition plan. So we're building fortitude and temperance in the natural sense. So they're actually building some degree of natural virtue. When they have these things, when they, number one, feel like they are capable of doing such things, and they're building some virtue, they're building some discipline, they're building those specific things, it has a tremendous carryover to attacking this demon of lust. So instead of just trying to attack lust as the primary target, we're using all of the weapons in our toolbox. We're using these things as a vehicle of improvement to attack lust. And this is not just a plug for my training program. You can go and take this and do this on your own. I encourage you to do that. I'm not worried about my business. I'm worried about getting more guys out of this place where they're succumbing to sins against purity, sins against the sixth commandment. And that's just one example of how it helps you achieve a greater state of morality, moral greatness. And another thing too is when you're putting your body through the paces of specifically, barbell training, there's this experience. There's not only can it be a movement meditation with God, but there's this real tangible experience with creation. Okay, think about this for a second. Every day that I get into the gym, I'm lifting either more reps, 1 extra rep, or 5 extra pounds. So progressive overload doesn't always just mean adding more weight. It means adding a rep here or there as well, getting stronger in one of these directions. You encounter the marvel of creation. So we do have like these scientific explanations for why these physiological adaptations happen, but much of like hypertrophy science, so science around muscle growth and strength building, which are mainly a neural adaptation, it's still in development. People have been lifting weights for a very, very, very long time, years and years and years, decades. And we still don't have this down to a science. There's all these conflicting, people in the science-based community, which are all retarded. And then you have these people that are like bro scientists, which I'm more like a bro science that kind of, mixes in the science. What is science if it's not trying to uncover the miracle and the creation of God, ultimately? But to me, outside of all of this science-y stuff, you encounter the marvel of creation. How the heck is it possible that the body can get stronger, progressively stronger each and every week? I've lifted weights that I have no business lifting, that should have just snapped me in half, but by some virtue, by some miracle of creation that I encounter, I'm able to do it. There's this interaction, and we understand that it's just muscle acting on tendon structure, but there's also a central nervous system thing going on there. There's something going on with the mind, and all these things act as a whole, the total person. And so you encounter this marvel of God with progressive overload. Like, wow, I'm getting stronger, I'm getting bigger as a result, and I'm creating these adaptations as a result of my repetitive, use of these movements in a progressive fashion. So I'm in awe of God and his creation and how robust he has made us as men in being able to do this. And so it's a movement meditation. You encounter creation in this very real way. And there's another point that comes up before I get into the slides. And that is, a lot of people are saying, well, St. Thomas should have been lifting weights instead of writing those silly books. Okay. And this is a comment that I actually got on X, and it's no hard feelings toward that guy at all. Exception makes bad law. Okay. The saints that we admire, that we have devotions to, lived in very different times as well. Many of these saints were running away from persecution and impending martyrdom. They lived in places in the world where life was really hard. They had really difficult jobs. So they already had fortitude. Their lives were already fortuitous. That's even a word. We live in a time and a culture, especially here in the West, that we are insulated by comfort, convenience. We have like an Uber Eats lifestyle where we have a plentiful amount of food at the click of a button. We oftentimes, work at home. I often joke that I sit in my sweatpants and at home and I pontificate about masculinity. It's not a very masculine thing. And so in this sort of insulated life that we have, I know many viewers and subscribers and supporters are blue collar men. So, these guys understand this more than ever because they're out there in the field actually doing stuff with their bodies. But a lot of us don't. So we need to recreate this work. We need to use these tools that God has given us at our disposal to grow in holiness, to grow in physical fortitude. And again, back to the spiritually muscular Catholicism point. This has to be in its proper place. Okay. It's merely a tool in which the secondary benefits of said tool are growth in the physical sense. We grow, we become more aesthetic, we become healthier, our postures become better, etc. But if we're not applying that same vigor, more passion, more consistency with regards to our spiritual lives, then we're missing the forest for the trees. Simply put, if we're doing it, then we're no better than the pagans. God doesn't care how much I deadlift. Although I want him to. I want him to say, hey, you did really well. That 805-pound deadlift was really cool. And I hope he says that. But odds are he's not. He's not going to care about that stuff, especially when it's not put in its proper place. Number one has to be this robust interior life where you've got to be progressively overloading the soul. Okay. And this is not just me saying this. Father Ripker said that, and I'm sure it's echoed by many other theologians and priests, etc., where if you're not progressing in the interior life, then you are regressing. So if you're not progressing in the interior life, you are regressing. The same can't really be said in the gym. Sometimes you go through periods of maintenance, or you're kind of stagnant, and you got to be creative in overcoming that resistance, plateaus, etc. And past a certain point, the body can only adapt and only become so big, so strong over time. But with the spiritual life, there are these levels of prayer that we need to ascend through to reach this state of sanctified perfection. And if we're not having that in our crosshairs, we should not have purgatory as the goal. It should be a state of perfection here on earth, in a state of like where we're not sinning. We're not even venially sinning. We've reached such a state of contemplation with God. We're in this mystical contemplation with God. That should be our goal. So we should be aiming to progressively overload our souls, make our prayer lives harder, make our penance more difficult, make, the way that we are trying to achieve sainthood more difficult. Because ultimately, this is very hard, but it boils down to two things. Number one is fighting to maintain your state of sanctifying grace. That's number one. And then striving for sainthood. I mean, if you want to boil down the faith, it comes down to those things. The barbell is only one of those tools to help mortify our senses and to embody the goodness, the beauty, the discipline, etc. And that's where precisely grace builds on nature. Because if you have a strong sense of natural virtue, when you marry that to supernatural grace, you have the potential for holiness. So again, this is all about putting these things in their proper order, in their proper place. Otherwise, we are no different than pagans. And so I'm going to get into these slides here. And it's a miracle that I can even use technology well. But I'm going to get into these slides. There's about 10 of them, and I'll kind of narrate over top of them. This is awesome. So hope everybody can see that. That's Pope Pius XII on physical culture. Again, this is an allocution to the Italian Sporting Association in 1945. So we'll go. Okay. Both those who accuse the church of not caring for the body and physical culture, and those who want to restrict her competence and activity to things described as purely religious and exclusively spiritual, are far from the truth. As if the body, a creation of God, like the soul to which it is united, did not have its part to play in the homage to be rendered to the Creator. This is exactly the point I was making earlier. It's a movement meditation with God. You're giving glory to God in these things. And it's really important that, especially those of us that proclaim the religion of the resurrection and the fullness and the embodiment of the truth in Catholicism, need to represent it in all senses. And a point that I wanted to bring up earlier that I didn't, it's a tool for evangelization as well, guys. It's a tool for evangelization. That when somebody sees a Catholic man, a righteous man, a holy man, a pious man, who's also, physically capable, it inspires something, especially in the young generation, right? Because primarily we're giving glory to God in creation. We're also trying to evangelize here too. So if we are grossly overweight, or we're really feeble and we're skinny, and we're like the classical pencil neck trad, no offense to all the trads out there, because again, too, I have much to learn off these guys that are very well studied in the faith, very theologically sound, they're very pious, they're very knowledgeable. But to me, and I'm open to being corrected, I'm open to my mind being changed. But when I see somebody that is grossly overweight, when I see somebody that is, super feeble, super skinny, etc., I see disorder. I see disorder. I don't see the total person being honored there. And although I do have some things I could learn off of that person has a few things to learn off of me as well. And if we're trying to make the best representation of a non-lukewarm and non-effeminate Catholicism, we ought to represent it in the physical. So in the final analysis, what is sport if not a form of education of the body? This education is closely related to morality. How then could the church not care about it? And in fact, the church has always shown for the body a care and respect which materialism with its idolatrous cult has never manifested. So that's it. Next slide. A masterpiece of God's handiwork made for his glory. The human body is in its own right God's masterpiece in the order of visible creation. What I touched on earlier, but said much more eloquently. The Lord has intended that it should flourish here below and enjoy immortality in the glory of heaven. He has linked it to spirit in the unity of the human nature, to give to the soul a taste of the enchantment of the works of God's hands, to help it to see the creator of them both in his mirror, and so to know, adore, and love him. It is not God who made the body mortal, it was sin. But if because of sin, the body made from clay of the earth must one day return to dust, God will nonetheless form it again from the dust and recall it to life. Thus, the church respects even the body reduced to dust, because it will rise again. How base is that? I mean, just soak that in for a second. You're giving worship, giving honor to God. The church has always respected the total person, the total composite being, the hylomorphic beings that we are, form and matter. So if we reduced it down to just theological knowledge and just piety with none of the physicality to back it up, we're merely just looking at our bodies as a means of transportation for our heads. And and I know I've said that, it's almost become a meme. I've said it so often. And I don't want to be a meme, but if that's what I'm become known for, then praise God. We are more than that. And plus, too, your tweed suit, your tweed jacket looks a lot better when you've got some drop from your shoulders to your waist. That's the meathead coming out. So I had to say that. All right. Hence, the body is one complete whole before God. We are one, not like as though the soul is trapped in the body as the Manichaeans wanted to maintain. I see a lot of guys acting like Manichaeans out here. Okay. That the body is all bad, or that, like, we're just spirits trapped in these flesh bodies awaiting, resurrection, awaiting, the beatific vision. But no, we ought to give honor to this loaned beauty of creation that God has given us. And he hasn't created us as separate beings. He's created us as a total being. This is precisely why the church in her wisdom has always honored the total person. Thus, anything good with regards to physical culture and the growth in virtues being a good thing, a morally good thing, belongs to Catholicism, belongs to the Church of Jesus Christ. It is essentially part of what we are. This is why the saints in heaven who don't have their bodies are in a state of incompletion, so to speak, as they are not angels. Man is a composite being made of body and soul, and is destined by God to remain that way for all eternity, either in heaven or in hell. 1 Corinthians 6:20, glorify God by making your bodies the shrines of his presence. There's a reason that St. Paul in his epistles always made these comparisons to sport or boxing or running a race. These things are closely related to morality. So grace builds on nature. Hence, we need to subject our nature in order that it will have a certain amount of docility to the soul. Now, what is the prime purpose and object of sport, if not precisely to cultivate the dignity and harmony of the human body, to develop its health, strength, agility, and grace? To achieve this work of education of the body, sport, or in this case, physical culture, subjects the body to a rigorous discipline, which dominates it and really makes it a slave. Training in stamina, resistance to pain, a severe habit of continence, and temperance are all indispensable conditions to carrying off the victory. It also creates a certain docility to the soul. You're restraining your appetites by doing this as well, by saying no to the things that you want to eat, by saying yes to this really difficult physical resistance. It restrains your weakness. It subdues that weakness, and it, again, subordinates it to right reason. Sport is an effective antidote to softness and easy living. I mean, this guy was talking about this in the 1940s, okay? The 1940s, 1950s. We are in a state where we are as soft can be, as soft as baby doo-doo, okay? That stuff that comes out of my beautiful baby boy Ambrosio's butt, that's what we are. That's what men have become. We're representing the faith in a very poor way, and we ought to do better in this regard. This is not just about vain aesthetics. This is about, again, the totality of creation. We become soft, we become castrated, we become defanged, and as a result, how can we really say that we're living the fullness of the faith and the truth if we're not embodying this in the physical self as well? It awakens the sense of order and forms the man in self-examination and mastery of self, in despising danger without either boasting or cowardice. So you see already how it goes far beyond mere physical strength and leads men to moral strength and greatness. I mean, for all these reasons that I've touched upon already in this stream, I mean, he puts it so much more eloquently. It's not just about, it's the secondary benefits, guys. The physical improvements are secondary benefits. We have to be really careful, because this can really get into vain territory really quickly. I can tell you a story too, because I flew a little bit too close to the sun. Earlier this year, I went to Mexico. Well, it was in May. It was our first big family vacation. So I got really lean. I got shredded. I was like probably 6 or 7% body fat. I said, I'm just going to get really lean, going to prime myself for another, massing phase, if you will, where I was going to gain weight and strength again. And it was really interesting, because I really felt the vanity start to creep up again. I was a little bit too obsessed with how lean I was, how aesthetic I was. It started to become really effeminate, and really, it was really bad for my spiritual life. And I remember didn't overeat or anything, but it was like God had humbled me, where after a couple of days, I was retaining, for whatever reason, this has never happened to me before. I was retaining so much water that I was like completely obscured. It looked like I was fat again. And then upon returning from the trip, it went away within like 2 days. And to me, that was God saying to me, hey, less focus on you, more focus on me. This is actually not good for you. So by flying too close to the sun in that regard, because we have to be really, really careful, we become vain. I did that. And I know that being too lean is actually bad for morality. So since then, I've gained about 12, 13, 14 pounds, and I'm in a much better place in that regard. And it's in its proper place. So we have to keep that in mind. Sport is the school of loyalty, of courage, of fortitude, of resolution, and universal brotherhood. All natural virtues, these, but which form for the supernatural virtues a sound foundation and prepare man to carry without weakness the weight of the greatest responsibilities. I mean, it's very true. It is a firm foundation. This is why the foundation of our existence is to be virtuous in the natural sense, and then marry that to supernatural grace in the confessional by fighting for our state of sanctifying grace, growing in piety, growing in love of God, growing in our love of the sacraments in the church. It's not enough to just know a lot about the church. We've got to live it. We've got to be the church. Our bodies are a representation of the church. And there's too much neglect. A lot of people talk about, Pope Leo calling a crusade. Man, most people ain't ready for that. Most people ought to read Defenders of the West by Raymond Ibrahim and Sword and Scimitar. He's got really, really great books. Actually, in fact, I should get that guy on the stream, on the channel. So pray that happens. I'll have to reach out to him, because he even in his books, and he's a very educated man, will refer to Christianity as at least muscular Christendom. And I absolutely agree. We've fallen so short of the glory of our history. As men like Skanderbeg, Richard the Lionheart, King Louis Ferdinand, Duke Godfrey, etc. All these men that existed before us that were these monastic warriors that were physically very capable, and in the spirit they were. I think I was reading about Ferdinand, where he was literally with a cat of nine tails, self-flagellating on the battlefield. These men were fasting, not eating, plagued by diseases on the battlefield, facing certain death, and still did all of these things. I mean, most guys of Christendom right now, they ain't ready. Okay, so getting into the points. Number one, mortification of the body is necessary. Penance. So this is a point I already got into. This is what sport should be seen as, to help obtain the ability and willingness to make sacrifices and to see the importance of sacrifice. Thus, the saying, no pain, no gain, both in the natural order and spiritual order. Man's life here on earth, says Job, is a battle. It is warfare. It's struggle. Here the Pope says, and this is a narration on that talk that he did, what matters to the Apostle St. Paul in his word about the athlete is the superior reality of which sport is the image and symbol. And I love this quote. It is the symbol of the unceasing work for Christ, the restraining and subjection of the body to the immortal soul, eternal life, the prize of the struggle. We're trying to get to this race. We're trying to win this race. The upward call of Christ Jesus, that is the prize. We're trying to strive and strain toward the prize, the upward call of Christ Jesus. And so this physical culture, this pursuit of fortitude in the natural sense is a representation, is a moving, living, breathing representation of that unceasing work for Christ that we all ought to take more seriously. Again, primarily putting the interior life at focus, but this helps us with our interior life. It fights that effeminacy, that sorrow, that sloth, that sorrow toward the spiritual goods, that laziness within us. Leaves us more disposed to being able to protect our families, to be able to protect the church. Now, I want to ramble on about that guy that was urinating at St. Peter's, and I just start to think, like, man, what would the men of yesterday, the men of antiquity in our faith, what would they do in that scenario? One makes you wonder. I want to just go off about that, but I'm going to save my words. Lord, please restrain my speech and guide my tongue. Okay, number two, the body should be so treated and trained as to be able to obey the counsel of wisdom and reason, whether it be a matter of work to be done or trials to be endured. Hence, sport has its purpose in helping us to learn the importance of wisdom and perseverance in the struggles of daily life. Again, we're talking about the sub-virtues of fortitude, perseverance, and endurance, mortification, equanimity, longanimity, all these things, sub-virtues of fortitude. I know I've gone on and on and on about those things, but it's not just, it doesn't just have applications to the gym. It's got practical applications to all areas of life. If you're willingly, and here's a point on pain, if you're willingly subjecting yourself to discomfort when discomfort finds you, it's going to be a lot less comfortable because you'll be able to bear it. This is why your prayer life's got to be hard. That's why your physical life's got to be hard. I have a good friend of mine, and a client works in pain management. Okay. And he was telling me, how the mechanisms of pain. He's much smarter than I, and he put this much more eloquently than me. But he created two examples. And I think this has a greater point to your life in general when it gives us these trials. You take the group, let's say the Muay Thai fighter or the weightlifter that subjects his body to pain. So let's take the Muay Thai fighter that, will kick trees to desensitize his shin. His pain threshold, it becomes greater, his threshold for pain. He can handle more pain over time, and his sensitivity to pain becomes down. He's willingly, or gets lowered. He's willingly subjecting his body to pain. So when he's in the battlefield, when he's in the ring, when he's doing these things, he's not going to feel that pain as much. He's a lot more robust in the physical sense because he's chosen that pain. Now contrast that to somebody who's just getting like a cigarette butted out on their forearm. They're not choosing that pain. It's like an unwilling vein kind of suffering. Their pain threshold is much lower and their sensitivity pain is much higher. And that might seem like a silly example, but this is what I mean. If you do not, and I hate to sound like the Catholic David Goggins or Jocko Willink here, but if you're not willingly choosing pain, when pain finds itself at your door, like it will, and it does for all of us, if you don't choose your hard, the hard that chooses you is infinitely more difficult. This is why we need to be seeking out discomfort with fasting, with arduous physical activities, with harder penances and our spiritual life. Because when these difficulties find ourselves, we don't buckle, we don't fold like a cheap suit, we don't fold like a wet blanket. We're able to, with fortitude, with strength, with the endurance of Almighty God in the development of virtue that rightly orders our appetites and helps us to achieve a higher state of relationship and communion with Him. If we're not doing those things, again, we're going to fold. And if we're doing these things willingly, we'll be able to better handle those trials that come our way. I've seen this in my own life, that if I wasn't doing these things and subjecting my body to these things and my spirit to these things, these stressors that have found me would have crushed me straight up. And I'll be getting to all the comments and questions after I get through these points. I'll be taking questions. So please leave your questions in the chat. I absolutely love interacting with you guys. So I haven't put them up yet because I just want to get through these slides. But please definitely leave your comments and questions, etc. And I'll be getting to them. Okay. So yes, in this sense, Pius XII, sports properly directed develops character, makes a man courageous, a generous loser, and a gracious victor. It refines the senses, gives us intellectual penetration, steels the will to endurance. It is not merely a physical development then. Sport, rightly understood, is an occupation of the whole man. And while perfecting the body as an instrument of the mind, it also makes the mind itself a more refined instrument for the search and communication of truth, and helps to achieve that end to which all others must be subservient, namely the service and praise of his Creator. I mean, I just went into that, right? Primary focus is God, secondary focus and secondary effect is all these benefits that we get. Number 3, sport is the school of loyalty, of courage, of fortitude, of resolution, and forming a sound foundation for the supernatural virtues, preparing man to carry without weakness the weight of the greatest responsibilities. Grace builds upon nature. Hence, in so many Catholics, what is lacking is not the grace of God, but nature, natural virtue. Today, we have become weak spiritually because we are effeminate, even on a natural level. He was saying this back in the 1940s. Okay, how much further have we fallen from that? We can never without sufficient necessity, though, and this is point number 4 that I should have labeled, we can never without sufficient necessity endanger our life for the sake of sport. Hence, serious life-threatening sports are not permitted to us as Catholics. We can't risk our life just for the thrill of it. So there's a couple points to be had here. Sport, which is worthy of the name, makes man courageous in the face of danger, but does not authorize his undergoing a grave risk without proportionate cause. This would be morally wrong and illicit. So I'm going to get these other 2 slides ready here, because it only allowed me to have 10, so bear with me. But this makes a greater point of both performance-enhancing drugs and combat sports. Now, a lot of my closest friends are either current or ex-pro mixed martial arts athletes. I have an affinity for mixed martial arts as well. I practiced a lot growing up. And when you're practicing it, in that sense, when it's just training, I think that's fine. I think when it becomes blood sport, I think there is grounds for saying that it is morally illicit. I'm not 100% conclusive on that. I haven't, landed with both feet on that conclusion, and I'm certainly, open to having my mind changed on that topic, because that's one of those difficult ones. But it seems like, cheap entertainment at the expense of other people, and kind of like, exploits that primal carnal part of us that wants to see obscene things, especially women in blood sport. Like, one of these signs of cultural and civilizational decline is not just women in sport in general, which is just disordered. Like, nobody's watching the WNBA. Nobody's watching female sports. Like, who does that? But women in blood sport, there was a study by J.D. Unwin on the fall of prominent civilizations, and there was a couple of things. One, when sexual decadence became as such, where everybody was just sexually mingling with everybody, and not just that, when women were in blood sport, that signaled sort of the beginning of the decline of society. And so, like, when you see, Rogan and I love Rogan and all these guys like reacting, when these women are like punching themselves in the face, it's just like, it's retarded. It's just retarded. Women shouldn't do that stuff. And to a degree, I can see the argument why men shouldn't do that stuff either, at least in that sense. So that's maybe a story for a different day. And I know, Pius XII have also talked about, women in sport and being immodest. Simply put, it's a sport that a woman is pursuing, even in training, lends itself to immodesty. It's immoral. So let's just put it that way. Okay. Sport, and I'm going to get on to that other point here in a second, of performance enhancing drugs. Okay. So sport must not degrade us if it does no longer becomes a sport in the true Christian sense of the term. So if it does, it no longer becomes a sport in the true Christian sense of the term. The means employed to give health to the body, the noble instrument of the soul, he stated, should take into account suitability of time and place. They should not excite vanity or promote immodesty, and they must not lessen a young woman's reserve and self-possession, which are both the ornament and guarantee of virtue. Women shouldn't be in sports in general. I don't care who. I mean, most of you guys that listen to me probably are in agreement with that. But now, talking about, performance enhancing drugs, I've gone back and forth on this topic. When done just for vanity's sake, I think absolutely it's immoral. And it was a good friend that I think had a discussion about this with a priest that said it wasn't necessarily that the taking of these drugs was necessarily immoral, but the means by which we would acquire them. So if one can acquire testosterone replacement therapy, and there's reasonable grounds for, your health being in such a state where one warrants testosterone replacement therapy, that you could say that it's not immoral. I just think now a well-formed conscience is where this kind of plays in. So if you're getting like Deca and D-ball and Trenbolone and all this stuff, and you're just trying to get huge and strong, yes, it's immoral. It doesn't really make sense to me to do that. I think there's so much beauty in understanding and knowing what your natural ceiling is. I can say by the grace of God, there was many opportunities over the course of now getting close to 15 years of training as a natural trainee that I was going to hop on drugs. I said by the other side of 30, I was going to hop on drugs, and I chose not to, by the grace of God. I've been natural, lifetime drug free ever since I started lifting weights at, 18 years old or whatever. And being able to experience that, I know progress becomes a lot slower when you're doing this a long time and you're trying to achieve, the heights of your natural potential, but there's a beauty there. Again, when it takes you, and this literally happened to me, it's taken me at one point, a year to put 5 pounds on my deadlift, to go from 800 to 805 took me 1 year. to go from 390 on bench to 408 took me several years. That's fine. It might seem like a really long time, whatever. The virtue that I developed in that, and just being able to have the long game and to persevere, like I could never, to try to accelerate that with drugs, that sort of vindication, spiritual vindication, that virtue that otherwise wouldn't have been developed, to me, it's not worth the trade-off. So if you've got a problem with testosterone and you get prescribed testosterone replacement therapy under reasonable grounds, then one could say that is not immoral. So that's something that I kind of wrestle with. So the important point of the Pope here is this: what would be the use of physical courage and boldness of character if the church employed them only for earthly ends, to win some cup or to give himself the airs of a superhuman? If he were unable when necessary to rob a half hour of sleep or put off an appointment at the sports ground in order to attend Sunday Mass, I mean, this kind of illustrates exactly what I'm talking about. Spirit first, body second. If he cannot conquer human respect in order to practice defend his religion, if he did not use his superiority or authority to prevent or halt with a look, a word, or a gesture some blasphemy, evil speech, dishonesty, or to protect younger and weaker members from provocation and suspect championship or companionship, if he cannot make it a habit of concluding his sporting successes with the praise of God, creator and Lord of nature, and all of his own faculties. which leads to this last point. Where did you get the strength from? Thank God, use it for his glory, or else both you and it, your physical strength or talent, will be equally plunged into hell. So if you live like a pagan, you will be plunged into hell because you're living for yourself. You're living for your own vainglory. And he said something really, really beautiful at the end here about Saint Sebastian. So I've got another window open here. So Saint Sebastian would use his military strength and courage to defend the faith against the wicked Emperor Diocletian, who was having the Christians put to death. Pope Pius at the time said that he thought it would be good for Sebastian to remain in Rome to defend the cause of Christians, and this he did. And so Saint Sebastian defended the Christians, encouraged the martyrs, openly denounced the emperor for which he was called up before Diocletian, and rebuked by him, and then sent out to be shot to death by arrows. Even though his body was covered in arrows, God granted him the strength of recovery, at which he once more went before the emperor with the same courage and denounced him in public for his crimes. The emperor had eventually had him beaten to death. Now, this is true purpose of sport, to grant us the strength and courage to accomplish great things for God and for souls. And if we don't do that, better had we not played, we would have less to account for. And here's the conclusion. Finally, the words of St. Paul. And I do all things for the gospel's sake, that I may be made partaker thereof. Know you that they that run in the race all run indeed, but one receives the prize. So run that you may obtain. And everyone that strives for the mastery refrains himself from all things. And they indeed that they may receive an incorruptible crown, but we an incorruptible one. I therefore so run, not as an uncertainty. I so fight, not as one beating the air, but I chastise my body and bring it into subjection. I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. As to the rest, there is laid up for me a crown of justice, which the Lord, the just judge, will render to me in that day. And not only to me, but to them also that love his coming. I mean, that's just beautiful. That just perfectly encapsulates what I'm trying to put into words here. And Pope Pius XII put it so much better than I ever could, so much more eloquently, so in much more of a holy sense. We ought to be better representations of our faith. And again, hammering this point. So those of you guys, the most staunch trads or normie Catholics, whatever you want to call yourself, bringing honor and glory and praise to God through your physical pursuits, secondarily to your spiritual pursuits. And that will be a perfect complement and foundation for your spiritual pursuits. I just don't understand why we've fallen so far from this. That, like, nobody really is talking about this. Am I just like speaking into dead air that I'm the only one that I feel like I'm the only one that talks about this? Maybe I've gotten it. Maybe I've gotten it twisted. I'm certainly not opposed to being rebuked or shunned for this, but you know, I think this is something we all ought to take a little bit more seriously. So that's the presentation. So I want to get to some of these questions. So we'll start at the beginning here. What's up, Cruz? I appreciate you and your support, brother. Strong body, strong mind. It's absolutely true. Gains for God. Come on. Any recommendations on building discipline? Okay, so this is great. So you've got to, and again, this is where you've got to really be understanding of where you're at. You know, your state in life, your schedule. It's very much like contextual based off of where you're at. If you're not doing anything right now and you're trying to build some semblance of discipline, you've got to start slow and work your way up. Don't just try to start at 5 days a week of lifting weights and doing all these things and tracking your macros. If for you, getting to the gym once or twice a week right now is what you can do, start with something that does challenge you, but something that ultimately you can build off of, that you can adhere to. So I don't care what is optimal. It's not optimal if you can't actually sustain it, if you can't actually adhere to it over the long haul. So you've got to kind of meet yourself where you're at. Start by making these simple choices, not eating junk, not eating out, not drinking your calories, eating wholesome single ingredient foods, getting to the gym twice per week, and walking more, being more active, etc. These are like the small steps you can make moving forward to start building discipline. My man Matthew, Professor Pantile, dude, I'm trying, man. I'm trying over here, dude. God bless you, buddy. I'm giving you permission to go to the gym, fellow Catholics. Come on, let's go. May God be glorified, my man. And Judex, imitating my patron, St. Thomas the Apostle. I'm late to the party, watch from the start and 1.5 speed. I kind of already sound grating on normal speed. That is a penance. That is a penance right there. 800 off the ground speaks for itself, even with straps. Yeah, I'm going to get crap for the straps, but I will tell you this. I've also done it with just hook grip. Now, it was in a sumo stance, so I've done 800 plus with both conventional and sumo. So maybe it doesn't count, but I have done over 800 pounds with no straps, just double overhand hook grip. Yeah, I mean, who knows what's going to happen to the Latin Mass even here locally. So we've got a SSPX not too far away. If it came down to it and we lost our beloved Fraternity of St. Peter Parish, which from my understanding is safe from what's going on with the suppressions of the Latin Mass going on, that's where we would go. My man. All right. You know what? I was actually thinking about this. It probably would be a cool idea one of these nights to one of these days, these afternoons, actually doing a live stream while I am deadlifting or when I'm doing a lift. I think that'd be really cool. Next time I go for something reasonably heavy, which seems to be like kind of all the time now, I should hook up the camera and get this going. Absolutely. Pious Patriot, dude. Thank you for tuning in and watching, man. Like I said, these streams are some of the most fun that I've had in general on social media ever. So, I just appreciate the support. Yeah, he also did know it was better to be single. I can't really expand too much about that. I've got 3 kids and a wife, and hopefully more kids to come. So, curious what your take on combat sports are. Yeah, I think there's tremendous good that can come out of it. It's just got to be well ordered. It's got to be, I think, just for the training sense of it. And I think once you kind of get into the ring and do it competitively, I think it kind of enters into that kind of circus blood sport arena. Again, I'm very much like open to my mind being changed in this sense, right? But I think it's a point that cannot be ignored, right? And again, if somebody's got a refutation of that from a moral perspective, I'd love to hear it. Yeah, don't get me started on the LGBT crowd, dude. Okay. Yeah, dude, absolutely signing off on combat sports. Every man ought to know how to defend himself and defend his family. It's prudent to do so, just like it's prudent to also, develop physical strength. I mean, it just blows my mind why this is not, is it because it's hard? Because I have a feeling these guys have hard spiritual lives. These guys that I see that, aren't very physically capable. So like, why not do this in the physical sense? I don't understand this separation of body and spirit that so many guys almost live as if they're separated entities. I don't get it. Pain and suffering leads to sanctification. Absolutely. Man. Yeah, dude. I don't know. Somebody's got to point me in the right direction here of whether it's moral or not. Please don't do that, dude. That is a penance. That's got to for sure reduce some time in purgatory. Yeah, he was. How devoted he was, who knows? I can't judge the state of his soul, but yeah, he was. I can't argue with that. Fellow Italian as well. To argue it, I wouldn't say that we're enjoying MMA at the expense of others. Poirier was an 8th grade dropout, and the only thing he was good at was fighting. The UFC was his lifeline. Yeah, I can't argue with that, dude. I can't. I can't. My man, glory to Jesus Christ. I really appreciate that. I can't even put it into words. Thank you. And Cruz, also thank you to you, my friend. Mike Brady, what's up, brother? So I train 4 days a week. I used to train for a long time, 5 days. And it's an upper lower 2 times per week split. So it's, upper with an emphasis on, let's say bench press and chest one day. And the other one is more focused on like triceps and other accessory movements. And then one day dedicated to, legs, primarily quads with some hamstring stuff. That's the day that I squat most typically. Secondary upper body day is, again, more focused on triceps, smaller muscle groups that support the main lifts. And then Friday has always historically been like my deadlift day. That's when I, lift. That's my favorite lift. It's like my favorite pet exercise, but I also do some quad activation or some quad exercises, I should say. So I do have like a 2 times per week. Every muscle group gets hit twice per week. And I'll hit some back. That's typically like kind of like a back day as well. And so, yeah, I split up the muscle groups, upper and lower, multiple times a week. And the focus is, secondarily is aesthetics, primarily is I just love gaining strength. I love hitting rep maxes and growing in strength. That's a tangible means of actually getting better. Like once you're in the game naturally for, 10 plus years or so, you don't really grow in physique all that much. Like my body doesn't look that much different than it did, let's say 3, 4, 5 years ago. I look pretty much the same. I'm a little over 5'11", and I'm like right now 205, 206, probably 10 to 12% body fat, somewhere around there. I'm not going to get much bigger than that. It's just not possible. If you see a guy that's like, 5'11", 6 feet tall, and he's, 220, 230 with abs, unless he's like an absolute genetic specimen, he's more than likely using drugs. And I just don't want to do that. So 4 days a week, the workouts, again, typically around 60 to 75 minutes. The deadlift days and the squat days sometimes take me longer, closer to 90 minutes, just because of like the warm-ups that it takes to get up above, 700 pounds on deadlift and up well over 500 pounds on squat. But the upper days go pretty quickly. All right. So, and Mike, thank you for the support, brother. I'm going to be doing them every week. I love doing these. Batman's Catholic. Let's go. The Punisher is my guy. Frank Castle. He's got to be Catholic. He's Italian, so he must be Catholic. My wife, I love you. She's upstairs tending to our children. I don't know how she has the time. Or maybe they're asleep. I hope they're asleep, babe. I hope they didn't give you a hard time. I love you. All right, I'll talk to you in a little bit. Okay. What would be your advice for an unbaptized man wanting to come to faith? Call your local parish, ask them when they're starting RCIA again, and jump in. One thing I want to say, and this is obviously unrelated to physical stuff completely, is I see a lot of guys that are, have intellectually converted, and it's okay if you're unbaptized. They're gonna give you all the sacraments on one day, my dude. Especially if you go to a parish that does RCIA over the course of like 8 or 9 months. My wife was just in, I guess they call it OCIA now, from September 2024 to April 2025 this year, and she received all the sacraments. If those people that are baptized that have proof of that baptism, that it was a valid baptism, they won't baptize you. They'll honor that, and then they'll give you the rest of the sacraments. In the case of my wife, they didn't document her baptism, so they gave her a conditional baptism. So don't worry about being unbaptized. Call your local parish, and what I want to say is you've got to pass a certain point. Just take the leap of faith, my dude. You can only intellectually convert yourself so far, and then understanding that the rest of the way through, and speaking to this point, God bless you, brother. The rosary is what's going to convert your heart, dude. It's going to convert your heart. If you're struggling with anything intellectually, you're never going to find all the answers. You don't have enough lifetime to have all the answers to all these great, incredible questions. But what I can definitely tell you is the devotion to Our Lady will draw you closer to Jesus Christ. Through her immaculate heart, you'll see his sacred heart in a completely different perspective. And I'll challenge everybody that's in the chat or in the stream that's already praying a rosary. One thing my friend Cameron Riker impressed upon me, I did a video on the rosary last week, was up your rosary frequency. I went from doing one rosary with my family a day to doing the glorious, sorrowful, and joyful mysteries. I know I'm leaving out the luminous, but 153-ish Hail Marys a day, all three mysteries. The growth, the devotion to Our Lady, and the love of Jesus, and the consolation that's come through that in such a relatively short period of time has been immense. So it doesn't take that much time either, guys. And it really revealed an effeminacy in me too, that I'm like, man, I can't set aside 45 minutes to an hour for the Lord every day. Like at least that I can sit down for 45 minutes and pray these 3 rosaries in a day, or just break it up throughout the course of the day. Super important. Don't think you can intellectualize yourself in the faith. You're going to get so far, and then you're going to have to take that ultimate leap of faith, and just jumping straight in through the intercession of Our Lady. I think her intercession is just how I can go on and on and on about it, but that's what really converts hearts. God bless you, pious patriot. You and your family, my man. Yeah, dude, I got nothing but love for Eastern Catholic liturgy. I've never been to a Byzantine liturgy before, but my wife's Lebanese. She was born in Lebanon. So I've got so much love. In fact, my son, God bless him, and my daughters, his middle name is Charbel. Okay. I've got nothing but love for Eastern Catholics, especially my Maronite brothers and sisters out there. So we actually went for a time while my wife was discerning Catholicism before she entered into OCIA. I took her frequently to a Maronite parish nearby to reconnect her with sort of her cultural roots or heritage, understanding like the how much of her culture is Catholic. And, and she wasn't really aware of it. She knew who Charbel was and who these saints were, but didn't really know the depths of who he was and how incredible of a saint. We've got so many icons of Saint Charbel around the house. And we've named him his middle name. His first name is named after Saint Ambrose, middle name after Saint Charbel. So Eastern Catholic liturgy, but we are a TLM going family. Praise be to God. God bless you too, my brother. I love you. Go pray that rosary, man. And dude, good. She's been pivotal in me coming to the faith. Absolutely. And continue that devotion to her. She only draws you closer to her son. And I think that's my mom. I love you, Mom. I'm actually going to see her in a couple weeks. And her birthday is in 2 days. So please pray for this beautiful woman. That is my mother. Pray for her. Pray a decade or the rosary. Send her an Ave Maria. Please, if you could do that, do a favor. I don't care if you do it. Don't do anything else. Pray for her and my wife. Please. Yeah, let's go, bro. Okay, so do I read scripture for the mysteries of the rosary? I don't. I've done a scriptural rosary before, mainly when I've been like kind of falling asleep and wanting to listen to some holy stuff. It's actually kind of funny. I've been falling asleep to Father Ripperger conferences for the last like I don't know how many months. I'll put on something on Sensus Fidelium, and I'll be reading about spiritual warfare or how to discern God's will or even more punchy topics while while trying to fall asleep. So he's in my brain. So I don't read the scripture for the mysteries of the rosary. That would take a long time. It's probably very edifying. I probably should do that, but right now I am not doing that. Dude, you got to say it every day. I know, in the calendar of the church, Sundays, like, you can take the day off of doing penances, or whatever. But these devotions, I guess they are in a way a penance, right? But in a way, you just maintain your devotions even on your off days. Like, why would you do that? I take creatine every day. I'm going to equate praying the rosary and praying to taking creatine. I take creatine every day, or most days that I remember. But I remember praying the rosary more than I remember taking creatine, because there's maybe 1 day or 2 days a week sometimes where I don't take creatine. But there's not a day that goes by, at least 99.99999% of the time, that I miss praying the rosary. And the Angelus. That's another way too. A lot of guys have like prayer lives that are really good in the bookends of the day. But when it comes to like the middle point of the day and kind of keeping that devotion throughout the course of the day, the Angelus is such a good one. 6, 12, and 6. Memorize the Angelus. Do it, guys. Okay. Dude, you know what? This is a good goal, but it feels more overwhelming when you're thinking about it and not actually doing it. So one good thing that kind of reduced the sort of the overwhelm is my friend Cameron also recommended, this is what he does. He prays, the opening and closing prayers just once, and then just gets into 2 other rosaries while skipping the Apostles' Creed, the Our Father, the Faith, Hope, and Charity, the 3 Hail Marys, etc., and just jumps into the subsequent 2 rosaries. So that probably makes it a little bit easier. But if that's your long-term goal, well then, dude, you got to up it to 2 in this next week, man. Come on. Yes, pray for her and my beautiful wife, Karen. And yes, keep praying, dude. And please call your parish, call a local parish. If you got a Latin Mass near you, call them, see what they're doing for RCIA, because they do it kind of slightly differently than the Novus Ordo. But either way, it doesn't matter if you go through the TLM or you go through the Novus Ordo. Some people are going to punch me for that. Just receive the sacraments, dude. Get the sacraments. Get yourself into the full protection of the bosom of the church and the sacraments that she provides us. That'll be the best decision you'll ever make. Same to you, buddy. You're in all my comments on my YouTube videos, and I tremendously, seriously appreciate the support, brother. So love you. God bless you, man. Oh, how long would it take to get a 300 kilo deadlift for a 32-year-old male untrained when I was training my best? Okay, so 300 kilos, for those of you that don't know and want to understand only American units, that's 661 pounds. And so if your best was 180, that's around 390 to 400 pounds. Adding 260 some odd pounds to that when you're 32 years old is possible, but you've got to probably have a genetic predisposition to that to achieve a 300 kilo deadlift, in your 30s and 40s. Now, to that point, if you have some kind of a training foundation, it's definitely possible. But I would aim for, short to medium term goals that are more modest, So if your best was 180, it would be reasonable to say, well, 200 kilos should be your goal. And I think you would get that quicker than you would imagine. And one thing I will say, because a lot of guys screw up when it comes to training in general, I spend very little of my training year in low repetitions. So I'm going through a phase right now where I'm trying to build up to an 810, 815 deadlift. When I travel back home to Vancouver in a couple of weeks, I tend to try to hit my maxes. I've hit actually all my 800 plus pound deadlifts, except for one. here where I live, but most of them has been in Vancouver. I spend very little of my time, maybe like 4 to 6 weeks a year in lower repetition range. Most people build strength in the sufficient volume necessary to build the muscle to then train to become strong in the higher rep ranges. So let's say like 5 to 10 reps. So don't be afraid to push those reps with deadlifts a little bit higher, limit it to 1 or 2 sets, 6 to 8 reps, etc. And that's going to be a lot better for you in the long run. Progressive overload, is the way, is king. So either adding a rep to a lift. Let's say you did 100 for 10 last week, and then your next cycle you do 100 for 11 or 105 for 10. You're adding 5 pounds. Either way, no matter how you skin the cat in those two directions, that's still progressive overload, and I'd highly recommend it. How many grams of creatine? That really does depend on how big you are. I think I've seen tremendous, cognitive, maybe not performance benefits, but cognitive benefits at 10, 15 grams a day. But again, I'm 200 plus pounds, so I wanted to sort of like maximize that saturation. If you're under that, I think 5 to 7 grams a day would suffice. And don't worry about necessarily, having to, what's the word? Load. Yeah. So on a lot of these supplement bottles, it'll say, hey, load 10, 15, 20 grams a day for a week or two, reach that saturation level, and you can bring it down to 5 grams. You don't need to do that. You just don't need to do that. The one downside to doing that is you'll get some GI distress. Yeah, you'll get some GI distress. So I wouldn't recommend doing that. Just do 5 grams a day. It might take you a couple weeks longer to reach saturation levels. So I would say just do that. Start taking 5 grams a day. Anytime, dude, jump back into the stream or jump back in any of these future ones, and I'll help you out, man. Yeah, we're going to baptize billions, buddy. Nobody knows where the local Orthodox parish even is, dude. Please, this guy's got to touch grass. This guy, we're going to baptize billions. What a joke. Online Orthodoxy is a meme, okay? No disrespect to my actual Orthodox brothers and sisters, because most of these guys that talk this trash online aren't even catechumens. They don't even have access to the sacraments. They're talking all this smack. What a joke. God bless you, brother. Yes, I do. So if you guys would go on my website, mikepantile.com, I do offer coaching. It's a higher level, high touch, one-to-one, coaching program. But if you're looking for strength coaching, I do that with my guys as well, and general mentorship. So check that out. Agreed. Absolutely. Tell me this guy's on a pencil neck without telling me this guy. Come on, tell me you're a pencil neck without telling me you're a pencil neck, bro. Of course, it's always the anonymous dudes, always that talk this trash, but it's just a meme. Bro, God bless you, brother. God bless you. Glory to Jesus Christ. Thank you so much. Again, this is going to be totally dependent. What's a decent workout plan for someone who works out regularly, been using the heavy app, and needs something more? It depends on your goals, man. I've seen a lot of tremendous results with a upper lower 2 times a week split. A lot of guys love push pull legs, 3 times a week, upper lower full body. There's too many variables and too many things that I'd have to know before actually making a recommendation. So, and one thing too, whether you're bulking or you're cutting or whatever, the same program is going to benefit you either way. So it doesn't have to change based off of what phase you're in necessarily. This program that's going to maintain the most amount of muscle and strength when you're cutting is going to be the same one that's going to be optimal for muscle building. So I would say if you've got time, I think an ideal, frequency, I think that is like the upper limit of a frequency is 4 days a week. And so I would stick with that. Upper lower twice per week is a good one. All right. So hopefully everybody's prayed for my good mother, my lovely wife. This has been a really, really, really fun stream. Let's pray for this confused Orthodox bro as well. May you find yourself in the bosom of Mother Church, my friend. Okay. I think we're going to conclude that stream here, guys. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for the chats. It's been awesome. I'm going to do this again next Wednesday. So stay tuned too, because I'm going to be having our man Enoch. In case you don't know who Enoch is, he's a Catholic rapper, the Catholic rapper. Okay, if you guys already don't know, now you know. Enoch and Anthony Abate Avoiding Babylon will be joining me next Wednesday for our stream. So we'll just be kind of shooting the breeze, answering questions, talking about, Catholic manhood, what's going on, not in the church necessarily, but what's going on in the traditional world. And hopefully that doesn't get us banned off of YouTube. So anyways, God bless you. I love you too, Mother, so much. I'll see you in a couple weeks. And everybody, I'll catch you next Wednesday. Please, if you guys already aren't subscribed, please like, comment, share, subscribe. Share this with somebody you think would be valuable. And I appreciate your support. God bless you, and Deus Vult.